for about 2 months. And we'd like to make a presentation to you that the board's put together and get your comments and feelings on it. And then we got this on the agenda for the 28th of March. We'd like the board to make a decision whether they would like to put this on the ballot, let the voters decide if they want to bond for open space or whatever. So with that being said, I'll turn the time over to Ryan and Justin. They will take the committee.
You get with Michelle to get that on the ballot?
It's already on.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Ryan Starks with Heber Valley Tourism and Economic Development. And as Councilmember Farrell said, I'm part of the committee of the Wasatch Open Lands Board. So the acronym, unfortunately, is WOLB. So I want you to all say it one time.
Oh.
Okay, and that's the last time we're going to say that acronym today, okay? Believe me, I don't like this one, so we're going to get away from it. I'd like to introduce members of our committee. So in addition to Steve Farrell, Spencer Park, Heidi Franco, we also have Cortland Nelson, Tracy Taylor, and Justin Keys. Okay, so just a little background. For the need for open space, why have this discussion? Well, you have a paper in front of you that reflects a survey that was conducted in January of 2018. And this survey has 1,700 people responding that open space preservation is the highest priority for Heber City. So this was a Heber City survey that was administered, and if you can believe it, we actually have one more person favoring this over Main Street congestion. So we know that they're serious. Midway City has a citizen group that's actively advocating for open space. In 2016, county voters overwhelmingly supported the 820 zoning in the Northfields area. And then a citizen-led group is currently petitioning for another referendum to preserve the same zone in the central zone of the Northfields. And then finally in 2010, the Heber Valley Tourism Office conducted a study in which the majority of visitors said that their primary reason for coming to Heber Valley for tourism reasons had to deal with the open space and quality of life. So what are some of the benefits of open space? I think we can identify quite a few, but we'd like to list several here with you today. Okay, so first of all, it's about choice. So this isn't a government taking, it's about choice. So no landowner is forced to use any of the tools that the WOLB will provide. Conservation easements protect the current use of the land with private property ownership and maintenance. So that same farmer can continue to farm on his land just with certain easements. Other land preservation tools are flexible for property owners' needs and choices. Another benefit is that it provides tax benefits to landowners who participate with the conservation easements.
Hey, on that one,
Yes,
do you
sir.
have any idea what kind of dollar figure that would be on the tax?
It would affect the capital gains tax, and it depends on the individual and how much contribution they want to make. It's kind of like they make a contribution or donation to this and they get credits.
I'm just wondering if we do a mathematical problem.
It's difficult because every person is a little bit different.
And further in the presentation, we'll give a few examples of other communities that have adopted similar models and kind of talk about some of the benefits that they've experienced too. So, all right, so the board will develop bylaws in the coming months. And the land criteria and processes will build relationships with prospective landowners. And then this is key to kind of the strategy as well. We will seek matching federal, state, and private grants. So what we're going after isn't just us alone. We want to make this a cooperative effort.
Ryan,
Yeah.
on this, is this something that Wendy Fisher's group can help us with? Will they be able to match?
Yeah, I think we lean on them a lot as a great kind of resource advisor. So, additionally, one of the major benefits of land preservation is preserving and protecting the heritage of the Huber Valley. So we live here because we want to be close to the land. We draw strength, inspiration, happiness, and peace from the open lands in the valley, as we all know as we come down Highway 40 from the Jordan Hill area. And just the benefit to preserving agricultural lands as we talk about economic development and lifestyle. This is certainly an important part of that. And then grazing and ranch lands as well. Another benefit is the lands with watersheds or wildlife protection. And then finally, public access corridors, view sheds, wetlands. Actually, I think there's another slide. Okay. So in 2016, there was a study commissioned called the Cost of Community Services. As we can see here, okay, actually let me skip ahead a little bit. It says this chart helps local leaders discard the notion that natural resources must be converted to other uses to ensure fiscal stability. So a little explanation there. Median cost to provide public services for each dollar of revenue raised. So as we look at residential, the actual cost is quite high compared to agriculture and business. So the notion that we have to develop, otherwise it's going to be too expensive, doesn't really hold water here. There's some value in preserving open space. So some more benefits. Protects the air quality, the tourism appeal, and the world-class vistas that we all love. Provides stormwater management without infrastructure costs. And additionally, it maintains the rural character of our valley and attracts economic development. What I mean by that is I'm meeting with businesses, many of which have come from out of state. I know in Mike Pearson's Charleston Plaza project, for example, Madison's Marshmallows, GDA Engineers, many of our companies come here specifically to get out of the city because they value that open space. So there's really a value to the community to have both a strong business community and an area preserved for open space. They kind of feed off of each other. And then planning for future growth. This just provides another incentive for growth to happen in the cities that are typically equipped to handle that type of growth. Okay, and then as we see here, it's all about preserving quality of life for future generations. Okay, so specifically the board wants to focus on several areas, just to highlight these. Agricultural lands, grazing and ranching, lands with watersheds, view sheds, and wildlife protection, public access corridors, motivated landowners that align with strategic areas, recreation and wildlife migration corridors, common lands of interest with developers and municipalities. And additionally, each city can still participate in with their own local lands board and prepare their own criteria and projects. So if Midway City, for example, wanted to continue to push for open space, they could still have that ability to do so, and then we would coordinate our efforts. Okay, so the organization priorities of the board. It's comprised of talented people. So we have a real estate attorney, a real estate broker, a county tourism director, a public lands director, and other elected officials with ag backgrounds and a commitment to open space. Nunchuck skills, cage fighting skills, you name it, we have it. And all have expertise and strong county and regional backgrounds, so we all have a vested interest into the community. The board has direct experience to provide a one-stop shop for different land preservation projects, and they'll be based on a property owner's choice. Again, this isn't a taking, it's an opportunity for a landowner to voluntarily participate in this program. So we have connection. What's that?
We have guidelines in place or suggestions here, so in order for this to succeed, you have to have the property over to this 1 feet.
Good point.
So we feel like we're very connected to the community and the donors. The board will facilitate grants. As I kind of touched upon earlier, we want this to be a cooperative effort. We'll work with the cities and provide regular communication and reports to the various municipalities and councils. Okay, and then finally, We'd like to schedule town hall meetings this summer specifically so that we could start the education process to the community. We'll provide a public survey, educate taxpayers on the details of the plan, and then we'll navigate all of the legal requirements. We know that this is going to take some good legal minds, and we're going to do that through our land attorney, Justin Keese. And speaking of, I'd like to turn the time over to him. So, music plays now.
Thank you. Well, council members, members of the public, thank you so much for listening to us today. Usually, I almost have to pay people to listen to me, so this is fantastic. I get an open mic. But what I'd like to launch into now is just a little bit of a discussion of a few examples of land conservation that have occurred here and elsewhere, and there's exemplar of what we'd like to do in the future. And the first one, I have I've got a beautiful photograph up here. It's a little pixelated on the large screen, but many of you probably recognize this area right here in our county. This is Snake Creek Canyon. What you may not know is that a key portion of this canyon at one time was privately owned, and it was actually open to mining. A portion of it was owned by a mining company. Many of you are probably more intimately familiar with this process than I am. I've just read about it, and some of you were likely involved. But through the concerted efforts of members of the public and municipal bodies, these lands were able to be locked up permanently, and at this point they're actually owned and managed by, I think, the Department of Natural Resources, who were here earlier, and they're held for all of our benefit. What's key about Snake Creek Canyon and why it would qualify in our focus today, for one, it's a beautiful viewshed, but it's also a watershed. This is where a lot of Heber City's water comes from, is right down Snake Creek Canyon. And without the efforts in the 90s of others to try to preserve this beautiful area for our generation, the generations after us, we might have lost that watershed, like many areas have done, where they were, open to mining. I think you can take a trip through certain parts of Nevada. I have family that lives in Nevada near Virginia City, where Mark Twain wrote a few of his famous novels. And let me tell you, most of their watersheds are completely polluted because they were open to mining, strip mining, other things. Park City's got a lot of the same issues up in their neck of the woods. If you build a new house in Park City, if you turn a little shovel of dirt, most of the time you have to truck it out to Richardson Flats, right? Because it's so contaminated that you can't even stand to build a house on it, let alone to drink the water that runs right off of it. Here in Wasatch County, due to the efforts of prior years, we have Snake Creek Canyon that is protected. Looking at the next example, this is Wolf Creek Ranch. Have anybody been to Wolf Creek Ranches here? I mean, it is privately owned, right? This is privately owned, although we do have a great forest access, which I use on a regular basis, even though it's very difficult to get my horse trailer up it. My Cummins, if I have 5 horses, my Cummins gets way down, I gotta go in 4 low. But this is just a beautiful area, and a few things that Wolf Creek Ranch provides for the whole community. For one, it's an elk calving ground, right? If you drive through there when the elk are calving, I almost guarantee if you go slow enough, 1, the rich people that live there are going to call the cops on you, and 2, you're going to see an elk calf on the ground somewhere with his parents. It's beautiful. These are 160-acre lots in this development. I represent several of those rich people that live up there. This is on the record. That's kind of scary, but anyway, these guys got together and they worked with Utah Open Lands. Somebody mentioned Utah Open Lands, Wendy Fisher's entity. Fantastic entity. They do it great. They do so much good for Utah. They provide a lot of services. They'll be one of those third parties we will work with. They worked with the developers of Wolf Creek Ranch and others to put a conservation easement in place. And what that conservation easement has done is ensured that the more than 13,000 acres right above our valley that is Wolf Creek Ranches will never be developed beyond the lots that are currently there. I think it's 62 lots or something that's in the development. So that is a wonderful privately owned asset that we have. I mean, all that wildlife that shelters there meanders about and gives many a hunter I've seen who sits right on the border of Wolf Creek Ranch a chance to shoot a trophy elk. Whenever I ride my horse out of there during the season, I see a couple of local guys parked right on, they must have Onyx because they're right on the edge of the ranches waiting for one of the unsuspecting elk to cross out of their little sanctuary. Next one. This is not in Utah, though it looks like it could be our valley. This is Last Dollar Ranch. It's a ranch in Colorado. The reason I focused on this one is because I think it speaks to, is it Councilman Member Peterson? You asked about the tax benefits that could exist, right? what can a private owner really get out of this? Because I think typically when we think of conservation, we think of, another example I'll go to, Bonanza Flats, right? We think of some purchase by the government going in some way and taking over a property, making it a national park. I mean, we naturally look to images of Teddy Roosevelt, you know, running around creating national parks. But that is not, I think, actually the best way to lock up land in our valley. There's just not a lot of public land available. What we can do, though, is things like Wolf Creek Ranch and Last Dollar Ranch. What happened with Last Dollar Ranch is there was a rancher there who didn't want his ranch to get developed. It's near Telluride, another ski resort community like we have, and what he saw was the other ranches around him just succumbing to development pressure. This happens in part because land values increase so dramatically once you have somebody move in. I looked this up. One of the property owners next to Last Dollar Ranch is Johnny Depp. Another one is the owner of Polo Ralph Lauren, right? So very wealthy people moving in, building gigantic homes, raises property values, drives people in the agricultural industry out, often, you know, clawing to the ground and not wanting to go. So there are ways, there are tools that are available to keep lands locked up as agricultural in perpetuity, forever, right? And one of the ways you can do that is by stripping the development rights off of the property. This is exactly what he did on the Last Dollar Ranch. He went in and set up a conservation easement on that property, stripped the development rights off the property so that nobody could ever come in there and build a mansion or anything else. And he locked it up as a ranch, and it's a ranch to this day. He was one of the first to kind of do this, and so, you know, he had an article in the Western Horseman magazine. There's other things like this, but this is a movement. I have a ranching background, grew up with ranches, and I ride horses, all that sort of thing. And all my friends with ranches, where they're going through the inheritance, this is one of my soapboxes. They'll often come to me and I say the word conservation easement, and they get up in arms and they're like, you know, getting their shotguns and saying, don't touch my property. But I think this is part, you know, my property rights, but this is part of the educational component, I think, of the Wasatch Open Lands Board, to avoid saying WOLB, is that we can sort of educate on the tools that are out there for private landowners if they are interested in preserving their property in an agricultural status and they feel like they're being taxed off. You know, what can we do to be creative to ensure that this stays farm ground here and moving forward? What can we do to lock you into a better tax status? You know, pull those development rights off so that your appraisal value is not going up, so that you're not, you know, increasing. There's other tools and mechanisms that exist. On the board, they call it the legal mumbo jumbo, and that's why you'll have somebody like me, Scott Sweat. You know, there's a lot of people that we can reach out to who read and interpret and look in crystal balls for legal mumbo jumbo, and we'll reach out certainly to Utah Open Lands and others to kind of create that.
Is there a story behind that name, Last Dollar Ranch? Did they name it as they deeded it over, or was it always that?
I don't know. I'll have to look that up.
It was always that.
I think it's always been the Last Dollar Ranch. Yeah, yeah. It's a great name though. I grew up working on a ranch called Gunstock Ranch. You just have to have those catchy, good names. The Lazy K, the Circle. You know, it's just boring otherwise. The final example, I'll focus on Bonanza Flats. Everybody's familiar with what happened in Bonanza Flats. I think this is more what we think of when we think conservation. This really was quite impressive, I think, even in the country, to see how many different entities, individuals, municipal bodies got involved to preserve this property. I think it's rather unprecedented, especially considering the time frame within which it occurred. I love this area. You know, I ride up there sometimes. I'm sure all of you have been up there. It's beautiful. I wish Park City luck in managing it going forward, but they did a wonderful job pulling together the money to make this happen. It's another example of what you can do when you get enough stakeholders involved, right? And this is why I volunteered to be involved on this board, with this board, is because I think we can do big things when you get enough people involved with an interest. And as Ryan pointed out, the interest is here in the public. Everyone wants to see this happen or something along these lines happen. If you get the right people organized and moving, big things like Bonanza Flats can happen. Okay. These are just the possible areas of interest that we've identified as a board thus far, and that we mean geographic areas. Obviously the North Fields, Ryan sort of alluded to this. I drive down that same stretch of road every day and it takes my breath away. You know, I don't know how often driving down 40 I have to like swerve to the left because there is just a train of cars pulled off on 40 to get out and take a picture of Timpanogos. You know, some people get all out. They have huge cameras set up and they're just enjoying what we get to see every day. I mean, it really is amazing. Another is the VSSD sewer farm. A beautiful property is a Center Creek to Forest Service property. I know a lot of us have got up there, especially if you come. Upper Lake Creek near the FS property, Midway properties and adjacent lands, Charleston along route number 113 and 189, the Wallsburg Meadows and Benches. That came up in the DNR presentation this morning. It's, I think, the best place to look for shed horns in the valley. I'm not letting any secrets out there. I mean, that really is amazing, that Wallsburg Wildlife Management Area, the number of animals that winter there. Jordanelle Developments and Benches is the final one that we kind of had in mind. And there's certainly others. And if anyone has, other geographic areas of interest that you think we should be focused on, chime in and let us know. So this is some draft bond text. This is what we would be, we would propose be put on. It needs to be worked up a little more, but I'll just read through it real quick. This is a slide. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. This is the draft bond text. What we're proposing is, shall Wasatch County, Utah, the county, be authorized over the next 20 years to issue up to 3 $5 million general obligation bonds for a total bond amount not to exceed $15 million for the purpose of ensuring the permanent protection of open space within the county, using land preservation tools and financing or paying the related costs of the same. Shall the county be authorized to pay from the bonds amounts all expenses reasonably incurred in connection with the authorization and issuance of said bonds, with the bonds being due and payable not to exceed 21 years from the date of the bonds, and to retire the bonds, shall the county be authorized to levy a tax on all taxable property within the county. Right. And what we would be doing, obviously, with what this would result in, we would put this on we're proposing that we put this on the November 2018 general election ballot. And obviously, you can see from the bond text, it's $15 million over 20 years. We're proposing that it be done in sort of $5 million draws. The advantage to this is you're not paying interest on amounts that you haven't drawn yet. And we can see if we're meeting the thresholds and if this is achieving the goals that we've set out for ourselves as to each of these staggered steps. Ideally, because rates are really low, it'd be great if we line the whole $15 million up now, lock in the rates, and then proceed with the $5 million increments. The thresholds and benchmarks we talked about, that would be developed obviously with County Council. I would imagine you guys have ideas about what you'd like to see achieved with this money. The idea is, like I mentioned earlier, it's not about going out and using $50 million to buy up land. It's more about using the money to facilitate interest on the part of the community, private landowners, others, and this would be more like, the water that primes the pump, to get things pumping, and we're getting money coming in through grants or through donations from private individuals. That's more the idea of how we would use this money, I would think, but it's up to the county council to help us set those benchmarks and increments. So this would be the cost of the bond, right? The bottom line. The cost of the bond to taxpayers, to property owners, will be approximately $9 a year per $100,000 bonded, or $100,000 assessed valuation for a $1 million bond. Now obviously, primary residences are only assessed at 55% of their value. That's the way it works with local property tax, and so it would end up being around $5 per $100,000 for a primary residence. It would be $9 per $100,000 in value for secondary homes.
That's per 1 million, correct?
Right.
Yes, sorry, for $1 million. Never trust the attorney to do the numbers. I told them this too. I said, it's not the accountant. And the board will develop bylaws, line criteria, materials, etc. for any property owners. This is, part of what I was mentioning we'll use the money for in part is to develop this and educate the public. In conclusion, the Wasatch Open Lands Board requests that the County Council vote at their March 28, 2018 meeting to put this open space bond proposal on the November 2018 ballot for a total of $50 million in $5 million increments over the next 20 years. Do we have any questions for myself or Ryan or any of the board members?
You said that you normally have to pay people to listen to you, but your clients are up there at Wolf Creek Client Ranch. Don't they pay you quite a good fee?
I have to be honest, I'm a poor boy, but I get by.
Any questions from the council? I have a question. So we haven't talked anything about how the boards, the way it's been described, sounds like it represents the county. But what if Midway City or some other entity or subset wants to do something that's different? What's their relationship or their channel to influence the board for this one?
I guess I can begin the answer. I think one of the great things about the board is it's representative of the county. We have someone on the board from every end of the valley. So we have a representative from Midway City, from Heber City, from Wallsburg. We have individuals from all over the valley. And I think our goal definitely is to be cooperative. That's what we'd like to do. We'd like to work in connection with the various cities. If they have something that supplements what we're doing, I mean, that's only brings about the greater good, right? But I think we're a fairly good representation of the membership of our county between us. We've got Wallsburg covered, Heber covered, Midway covered, somewhere from
And
everywhere.
in the MOU we worked on, if an entity has an open space board and has the same criteria or similar criteria that they identify, they can get a percentage based on their taxable value of the bond, is the way we have to set it. So if Midway was 25% of the taxable value, and then you can get up to 25% of a bond.
Could they get more than that if the board and the council decided that they wanted to?
Right now, we got it set up as taxable value, but that's something we can look at in the bylaws. It depends on what the council wants. And
But
then
again,
it
15
depends what this council wants to do.
Yeah.
And the 15 million isn't the ceiling by any means. We think that that's just like you said, the water to prime the pump. The more money will flow. And so when we think of 25% of 15 million, that doesn't sound like a lot, but maybe 25% of 30 million starts to move the needle a little bit.
Any other questions from the council? Ron?
Now, just to clarify, your tax impact, you said $90 per 100,000
Per 1 million.
value. The average home is about 3 in Heber, so that's $27 for the average home, and that's per 1 million, and you're authorizing 15. So let's see, that's $450 per household.
We're authorizing 15 over 20 years.
So over
We do it in $5 million increments.
I got it, but the authorization is for 3 of those. So over whatever rate you authorize them, that's $450 per house. Am I calculating right?
It would, yeah, you are. So on the first 5 might be about.
Just for full disclosure to the public, I mean, that's,
Yes, for the second.
Ron, it's 55% of that 300,000.
well, except for businesses.
And businesses
except
and
for
secondary are
non-primary
100, yeah.
residences.
And half our
except-
county is 50% second home, so half the people are paying that $9 and half are not.
Okay,
And the businesses are paying full rate.
So for a $5 million bond on a $400,000 home, the primary residence would pay $99 a year, secondary would pay $180. That's a $400,000 home for $5 million.
so 3 times that for the potential of the bond, right?
Yeah,
So $300.
it went all the way out, yeah. But I mean, at some point, some of it's getting paid off. I don't know how long that bonding cycle is.
And there again, too, Ron, we're expecting continued growth and value.